And welcome to V Radio. I'm sorry about not really getting an opportunity to promote this ahead of time. Abel and I had been working on this for a while and we just finally got it together. I want to welcome Abel to the show. If this is your first time checking out V Radio, make sure that you've gone to hy.page/V Radio where you can find all of my links. There you can find Rumble, you can find my Discord channel, you can find BitChute, Odyssey, etc. I have all of these different mediums basically to try to be, I would say, redundant because there are people who covered less complicated issues than I did and still managed to get yeeted off of YouTube instead of, including longtime friend of the show, Neo Unrealist, is now on Rumble only. If you're listening to my show because you met me because of Neo Unrealist, and you didn't know this because I still run into people all the time who don't even know that he was deleted off of YouTube, make sure that you go to Rumble and check him out. His streams are always fantastic. So, Abel, thank you for coming on today. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of get into your story.
All right, welcome, guys. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Abel Garcia. I'm a detransitioner. If you don't know what that is, it means that I transitioned. So I am biologically male. I became a transgender woman, and then eventually I detransitioned and became a detransitioner, or just a man again.
Right. So let's first of all begin with how does the story start? Like where would be the moment that you would say things began to head down the road to you trying to change your gender? Was there like a specific moment or like, anything that you can kind of recall where you started to have feelings that maybe that's what you wanted to do? And then also describe how the people around you, or just how did you come into the information? Were there people that influenced you? And I'll let you tell the story.
Sure. So there's, I wouldn't say there's exactly one specific moment in my life that was the point. It was multiple small factors that were built up. I guess if you want to start from my childhood, I've always been a very shy kid, very timid. I wasn't like my cousins, and I'm culturally Mexican, and I bring that up because my culture is very masculine. I was way the opposite of masculine. So from a young point, I was always not very masculine. So I questioned myself as a young kid. Also, doesn't help that my father was absent from my life, working nonstop, and so that's where the childhood starts. But eventually, I'd say around late middle school, early high school, somewhere around that timeline, I found out what transgender was and found it through YouTube. Don't remember how I found it, but that's what planted the seeds of doubt in my head. And I'll just leave it there because I know there's going to be more.
Oh, well, no, for sure. So
Yeah.
you're saying you kind of discovered the concept of transness on the internet then? There weren't like people around you that were discussing it?
That is correct. I lived in a very small town in both Southern California and Central California, so there was not really much people who knew what that was, and I didn't really have friends, so couldn't really figure out through other people.
Yeah, and the internet is definitely a powerful weapon in this situation, for or against. I mean, I remember I was sitting out in front of my kids' middle school, and there were these three girls who maybe were in sixth grade or something, and they were swapping pronouns and like knowledge of sexuality with each other, like they were discussing Pokemon cards or something. And I was like, where the hell did these kids even get this? Because we live in this little
So it's
farm community.
so kids switching pronouns is it's now this day and age is Pokemon cards.
Right. Well, that's what it felt like. And when the way they were talking about it too, it was like it literally sounded like a group of kids discussing something, you know, that they were interested in the same way as they would be with Pokemon or whatever. Like that's what kind of threw me. And it was also, again, it was like we lived in a little farm town. I'm like, a little conservative farm town. I'm like, how does this even get to them? And it turns out, well, it's TikTok, it's the internet, you know. So we have a question here from the audience. It says, did you question yourself or did others question? And I think we've kind of answered this because you're saying that you didn't really have a trans community that recruited you. It was more of a matter of you kind of discovered it on the internet. Would that be correct?
Yeah, the internet is what officially planted the seeds of doubt, but I did question myself as a young man, or I guess at the time, a young child, because I didn't think I could hit the standards of what my culture was as a masculine man.
And so I guess then what you're saying is like, I mean, do you feel like I guess I'm trying to put this together. So when you say like you didn't feel that you fit in with the masculinity of did you say you were Mexican?
Yes.
Okay, the Mexican culture, but so that led you to the direction of thinking maybe you needed to go the other direction. How did this? I mean, when you finally came to it because of YouTube or other internet mediums, what was the next step in the story at that point? I mean, how did you move forward with it?
So after YouTube, I ignored it mostly, but it was in the back of my head, and I didn't do anything until after I was out of high school. I went to college, and I was asking myself, what do I want to do? Do I want to transition? Do I want to, or let me rephrase that, do I want to be a man, or is it possible to be a woman? Those were my questions. Eventually, I got referred to a therapist, and at my local LGBT center, and that therapist immediately on my first appointment with her said, "Yes, I am a trans woman." She had my letter to transition right away. And when I asked her why was I being affirmed so quickly, she said she didn't want to gatekeep me.
Right, of course. That actually brings us to Arby's question here. Um, okay, when you sought care, did any of the medical people involved question or push back, or were you just affirmed straight up? And I think you kind of answered that, but like, you didn't get any pushback at all, is what you're saying.
No, nope, I never got any pushback when I wanted to transition, but I did get pushback when I wanted to detransition.
That's interesting. Got to do some conversion therapy to keep you where they think you belong, right?
Yep.
So basically, what you're saying is you basically just went in there and they just affirmed you right there. It's like, oh, okay,
Yes.
so you're not feeling masculine enough, so therefore that means this. And I think one of the things that bothers me the most about some of this stuff is that I think that, for example, I think gender roles are a thing to some extent. I mean, my daughter is a boxer and a wrestler, but she never questioned her being a girl. She still liked pink and she still liked unicorns. It seems like there should be like a varying degree of any of these expressions, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're the other person. Like, I mean, the funny thing, the other gender, the funny thing is, even like Jordan Peterson, who's very critical about this kind of stuff, acknowledges that there are, feminine, like more feminine men, and then there are more masculine women. That happens, right? Organically on its own. It doesn't mean, then that's why, like, especially if they go after tomboys, like the first girl I ever kissed was wearing a baseball cap with a t-shirt and jeans and her jacket tied. I mean, it was like total tomboy, but she was still a girl, and I think that there's something to be said about suggesting that there's nothing wrong with you as a man, maybe feeling a little less masculine than other people around you. And, there are definitely certain cultural norms that are going to impact whether or not you feel adequate in that role. It's unfortunate that you didn't have any friends around you, to help back you up in any of that. But I think that's an important part of the story, is just to note that we also just need to accept that there are people who are varying degrees of masculine or feminine, regardless of what their gender is, and that they don't have to take such drastic measures, just because they might have some interests that might be from the other gender traditionally. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. I know that the reason why I didn't really have much friends is because my parents were always telling me at a young age that I shouldn't have friends. They're just going to use me for whatever I have, which is what happened to my father when he was around my age. Which I
Hmm.
can understand why he said that, but shouldn't have said that to me at a young age.
Well, no kidding. That's actually kind of really messed up. Well, I guess so. Then we move on to you transition. They basically give you no pushback at all. Nobody warns you about it. Now, when how far did you go, if you're comfortable with discussing it anyway, as far as transition? You did hormones? Did you do any surgery? Did you, like, how far did we go?
Sure. So I had hormones, I had surgery, and that was it. Obviously, including social transition. Hormones, I took estrogen and spironolactone. estrogen, I use the off brand, which is estradiol, and then spironolactone that is was used to suppress my testosterone. I eventually learned it was actually used as it's mostly used for a heart condition medicine, which I'm not surprised they're using medication for outside of its main purpose. And
Right.
then surgeries wise, I only got breast implants, removal of those implants, and reconstruction of my chest. They actually gave me my letter to get bottom surgery as well.
Okay, and you didn't go through with that. Thankfully, you
That is
figured out
correct.
where you were at before that happened.
Yes.
So one of the things that, because I've had other trans activists on my show who are, either against children just transitioning or just like trying to make sure that people are very clear about it. So like, I don't know if you're familiar with Shapeshifter, but one of the
Yes, I'm
things,
aware of shapeshifter.
one of the things that they made very clear was that they felt that people were not really honest with them about just how not functional things were going to be. Like you didn't have bottom surgery, so obviously you don't have that element of it, but I'm sure you've talked to other detransitioners who've had this problem. But for, what they said was, like the vagina that I was given is not a vagina. It's not close. It's not even a really good rendition. Your body treats it as a wound and tries to, seal it up every chance. Like it's like basically it was very grisly what they described, and it kind of like led people to wonder. It's like, so so did you have complications, for example, that you did not anticipate when it came to the surgery that you did have? And do you feel that you were kind of misled or not given enough information?
So surgery with the first surgery that I had, the implants, I didn't really have any complications besides numbing. Well, except for the right half of my chest eventually going numb. Um, and that's between then and now with the three surgeries. So I can't really feel any part of my chest, which isn't fun,
No, I
sadly.
can imagine.
Um, but I feel like overall my body healed pretty well with the surgeries. But obviously it did take a toll on it. I can't really feel anything on it, and then I've been working on for the last few months. Great improvement, but other people, especially the person who's training me, says he doesn't see any improvement in my chest, which I speculate due to the fact that I had the implants that they had to remove some muscle as well.
Right. So, and I guess we can rewind a little bit here. So basically, you go in and you tell them, I'm not comfortable necessarily in my level of masculinity. You're told you're trans basically immediately. How long did it take them before they were giving you hormones?
So I didn't, like I said, I didn't accept the letter that day. I actually waited. I want to say because that when I saw the therapist, it was early 2016, and I didn't accept the letter until October of that year. It wasn't until May of that year when I decided I wanted to transition, but I couldn't transition at that moment.
Do you think they would have let you? I guess I'm misunderstanding. Go ahead.
So they were on board the minute I walked in, but I was given enough. I was pushing back enough that they didn't keep pushing forward. It
Ah,
wasn't
okay.
until I finally agreed to saying yes in May that they put more effort into letting me transition.
So then you get down the train and it starts with the hormones. How far into it did it take before you did the surgery? And I apologize if you already explained that. I can't remember it. Go ahead.
No worries.
Um,
So again, is October when I agreed to start everything. November is when I started the hormones.
okay. And then how far off was the surgery?
Surgery was, I want to say, May of 2018, and they approved me 11 months after I started hormones.
So basically about a year within of hormones. Have you ever heard of any trans people getting approved for surgery sooner than that?
I wouldn't be surprised if they were, because I lived in California.
Do you think what would have held you up had more to do with perhaps funding it, maybe more than getting approved for it? Like, I don't know. Like, do they just?
So for me, I had insurance, and that was everything, that was covering everything. So funding was not an issue. My main thing was, uh, well, I have to go back a little with my transition. So before I even
Sure.
saw the therapist, I have to assume it was the voice of God that was telling me this, but something told me if I'm going to transition, I should wait at least 5 years before I get implants and 10 years before I get bottom surgery.
Right.
I don't know why, but like I said, I have to assume it was the voice of God that said that, because I eventually broke the first rule, but I stood my ground and agreed to the second rule. And eventually, after getting the implants, some other stuff happening around that same timeline, and I can explain later.
Sure.
Um, I realized that I was making a mistake, and I was working on detransitioning.
So did I guess like so when we get into this transition, like, and at this point, because you said you had kind of a small, well, basically non-existent peer group before that. Did you end up joining the greater trans community at that point? Like, did you
Yeah,
become more? And so then, of course, that puts you in a situation where suddenly you go from having no friends to having lots of friends. Do you feel that that might impact anybody's decision to get involved with any of this? Like that maybe just now, okay, look at this, I've finally found my tribe, so to speak.
yeah, I know. What I've seen a lot from the people who transition, before, they're very social outcast and they're awkward individuals. But once they do transition, they obviously are bombarded with the trans community and the greater LGBT community, and so they're love bombed and supported, and then are told that their family and those that were their connections before they transitioned, if they don't completely agree with the transition 110%, that they obviously hate them and work on trying to destroy those connections.
Yeah, that's kind of, that actually follows along with what I've kind of seen. For one thing, um they there's these teacher conferences you can go to where they teach you how to do this, and essentially they set up these like they usually kind of try to come up with some kind of like non-threatening name like the diversity club or whatever. And then you come to find out that they're literally told to try to find the kids who don't have any friends and reach out to them immediately. So then you get these socially awkward kids who didn't really have any friends. And then all of a sudden, there's this group of people being nice to them. And well, what do these people do? Well, they try to find some special flag of the many flags that are offered to them to say, oh, well, you're pansexual, you're asexual, you're non-binary, you're this, you're that. And then now you have social capital within that group based upon that. And that's what leads to the love bombing you're talking about, which to somebody who probably didn't have any friends in school is probably immensely powerful, to just suddenly be showered with all this positive attention. And that's, I think, one of the major factors to this is that, some people suggest that like it's almost like these are the goths of this generation. Like goths used to be kind of a almost cult like group within the school of, kids who were awkward who then all kind of got together and then identified as this other group of people. I mean, I would say goths, I don't want to say that goths are bad people. What I'm getting at is that, groups like that will form,
It's
then
like a
people will join.
phase.
Yeah, exactly. A
Yeah,
phase.
no, I understand. Yeah, no, I'd agree. If goth, emo, and all that other stuff was still relevant today, I would agree that a lot of these kids would be goth and emo.
Right. That's the other thing that bothers me about this is that at that point, especially because the teachers are being told, well, go find the ones who don't have any friends, as if to assume that everybody who doesn't have any friends has something wrong with their sexuality or is not allowed to express their sexuality. I have plenty of friends in my life who are on the spectrum who don't have a lot of friends because they're socially awkward. They're still attracted to people of the opposite sex and they're still confident in their gender, but these people kind of just nail you with this notion that, well, if you just changed your gender, everything would just fall into place. Now, I did want to talk a little bit, kind of also rewinding a little bit about what was it like when you first took hormones? Because, I've kind of commented on this and discussed it with other trans people, like what their experience was like the first time as trans men what it was like when they took testosterone. They felt fantastic and amazing. Like suddenly there was this wash of, wonderfulness. And
Euphoria.
yeah, but that's just testosterone. So what was it like for you?
So for me, I didn't really feel anything on the estrogen when I first took it. It did obviously do its job that I was told that it would do, but what I mostly was getting is, I would agree with the sense of euphoria and happiness and all that stuff with how the people around me were love bombing me, saying that I
Right.
was finally becoming the woman I was supposed to be. This is who I was meant to be. So that had more of an effect than what the drugs were doing to my body.
So it sounds like, I guess what you're saying then, I guess estrogen treatments probably don't have the same euphoric effect perhaps that testosterone does.
I think they both have a good amount. I think it's also a fact that the love bombing that they get from their communities, a placebo effect as well.
Yeah, and I could see, okay, it makes a lot of sense, especially like to those of them maybe who didn't have very good relationships with their family. And that actually kind of brings me back to what you were saying, is that these groups also kind of try to encourage people to alienate their own families and friends. And that's one of the things that I noticed. Like, I had somebody who was probably my best friend for like decades, and then they decided they were trans, and they didn't just change their gender. It was like they divorced their entire previous life. Like they didn't talk to anyone that they used to talk to. They didn't talk to their parents anymore. They basically just got assembled into that group. And the reason that concerns me is that that's essentially cult-like behavior. Cults get you to do that. Cults get you to abandon your friends and your support group and then make you feel that the only way you'll ever be accepted is if you do what they say. Would you agree with that kind of characterization?
I feel like I would rather trust an actual cult itself than the transgender community,
Oh my
because at
goodness.
least a cult is reasonably sane compared to the trans community. Now, being
Reasonably
a
sane.
little uh,
So even the Branch
witty on my
Davidians
comment.
are better than man, yeah,
I will say this: if I was an adult in the '90s here in Texas, I'd rather join one of the cults here
mhm.
than the transgender community.
Have you shopped around for that, thinking to yourself, maybe I just need a cult?
You know what? Again, if I can go back in time for the '90s here in Texas, I would definitely prefer to live in Waco.
Live in Waco, maybe become a Scientologist or something, Oh man,
Yes.
that's terrible. So, okay, what is it? And when you make that statement, what is it that's so crazy about it that would lead you to that? And I'm not arguing with you. I think that's a solid assessment. But what is it that's so crazy about it?
The sad part of comparing the cult with the transgender community is that the transgender community, well, they both agree to have you distance yourself from your friends, families, anyone who disagrees with your ideology. Is at least,
Mm-hmm.
well, the transgender community obviously tells you have to change your body, you have to take these drugs that we don't really know anything about, you have to get unnecessary surgeries that they don't really tell you the long-term effects. Like a young man, if they get their penis turned inside out into a makeshift home, they
Right.
have to dilate that thing and for the rest of their lives. And if they don't, it's going to close it because their body receives it as an injury, as
Right.
a wound, which is what
Right.
it is.
Yeah.
Now, if you compare to a young woman who gets their their reproductive organs removed, they have to deal with more consequences. And if they try to add a fake penis, uh, there are doctors who make enough mistakes on that that it can lead to more health consequences.
Right. Yeah, that's there was one of the trans people on What Is a Woman kind of described that, and they get infections all the time, and
Yep, that's who I was referring to.
yeah, that's a real problem. We got
Yeah.
a question here from the audience. Did Abel get any other mental health care, or were they offered any other mental health care, such as for depression or anxiety, when you were told you were trans?
No, I was not offered anything. I've never been diagnosed with depression, trauma, anxiety. And the main cause that I see along with these young people who are transitioning, who have detransition, is autism. And I've never been diagnosed with anything, so I suspect I have some of those forms. I definitely have trauma. I have trauma.
Right.
Uh, Depression, definitely after everything that I've gone through. Anxiety, more than likely.
Right.
Autism, I've been told I have some characteristics of autism, and I just found out some family histories recently, so I definitely have to go get checked out now.
And so that's a situation that, I mean, first of all, people with autism frequently have problems connecting with other people, and if they crave it, just like anyone else, but there are difficulties in them even just processing social information. Like, that's more or less, I mean, social information meaning just social cues, social, and that can create all kinds of problems with them trying to get along with other people. And that has nothing to do with their gender. It has nothing to do with their sexuality. It's all about that. And I think that autism definitely seems to be a very common thread when it comes to this issue, and it's not given the attention that it really deserves. But at the same time, I think that that's one of the things that they kind of just tell you, and that's basically what you're telling me, is that you went there, you talked to the person you spoke to. Was it a therapist? Like, who was it?
Yeah, so she was a therapist. Now, a little more background on her. So, again, she worked at the LGBT Center. She was a lesbian, and she was also the head of the transgender support group there. So, I'm not saying anything, but I feel like that might be a considered conflict of interest.
Yeah,
But I would
actually.
never say that.
Well, no, and that's funny because, like, I have friends who are psychologists and psychiatrists who, we did like live action role playing together, and they didn't want anybody to know because it would be a concern for their job. Like, they could, like, the committees would come after them for just being involved in a role playing environment. Like, I was like, is that real? Like, they're like, yep, it's ridiculous, but it's the truth. So they wouldn't tell anybody about their personal hobbies or anything because they would be worried about losing their license. But now, if you happen to be part of all these support groups that literally only lead you down one path, that's totally fine. Somehow that's not a concern, and that does really concern me. And the more I look into it, the more I find out that psychology, psychiatry, and sociology have all been more or less co-opted by activists. And, as you said, very little understanding of the drugs. When I had Arby on for our marathon stream of like 4.5 hours, we went over like all of the lack of evidence, that goes into this. And then they still are willing to just throw people down the road. So this person at that point, they didn't entertain the possibility that you were autistic. They didn't entertain the possibility that you were just depressed. They didn't entertain the possibility that you might have some other, mental, concern. And I say concern, because I don't think by any means you have, like, drastic mental illness, but you might have mental problems that could be better solved just through psychotherapy, that was like, rather than all of these radical changes, and that to me is very chilling, because it means that somebody who should have been taking care of you was instead just pushing you in a direction to fit their agenda. Like, that reminds me actually of the conversation that Jordan Peterson had with Chloe, was that he you can tell he felt terrible because he was a psychotherapist, and he's like just sitting there going, well, what should have happened was they should have done this, this, and this. Like, if they were following actual clinical procedures, they would have checked for this or that, and he felt horrible about it, but what you're telling us essentially just kind of confirms what a lot of us we're afraid of, is that the burden of proof is basically you feel this way, and that's it. They don't have a vested interest in trying to make sure that that's exactly what's going on. And then they put you on this train as fast as they can get you in the door, and okay, so as you go through this, because I know we're only going for about an hour today, so I want to make sure we get to all the important parts. Um, as you're going through this, eventually, when did you start to have doubts? And was there like a moment in particular you could remember?
Again, the funny part with me, it's always a buildup. I don't know why. So the again, I go back to what I said earlier. I have to assume it was the voice of God was telling me take it slow. Again, I broke the first rule, but I did follow the second rule. And when I did, eventually I got the implants. The 3 months that I was there or with the implants, everything went well. I was happy. I didn't have any complication. But then again, I had so much affirmation from the community. I had love bombing from everyone, and I was on so much painkillers. I don't really remember most of it. But
Wow.
at the same time, I was also going to the police academy, and I was actually volunteering for the department that I wanted to work for, and the transgender community did not appreciate that. So eventually, they kicked me out of the community, dragged my name through the mud, canceled me, and left me to on the side on the ground to be alone.
You're right.
So
Just kicked you while they excommunicated you. And this was
yeah,
all okay. Just to go over that again, what was the catalyst? What led to that happening? Was it
it was
what?
multiple factors, but the buildup was at least the main thing was again the possibility of being wrong way before I saw the therapist. But if you want to pinpoint anything, it was the fact that I wanted to become a cop.
Ah, okay. I thought that's what you said. I just wanted to be clear. So just
Yeah.
the fact you wanted to be a police officer meant you couldn't be part of the trans community?
Yes.
What the fuck? I'm just gonna spit that out. Like, why? Like, there's no trans cops? Like, they don't acknowledge the possibility that that could
No,
happen?
there
They
was
just
no cops in the department I wanted to work with that were cops.
what the
I would have been the
hell?
first. Would
Well,
have.
right, but I mean, the point is like, so what do they think then? Nobody should be cops, or just trans people are not allowed to be cops, or you can't have questions about your gender identity and be a cop? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But
Yeah, but that
I
is
guess it just. So is this just that? What would they say? What is the word for it? Intersectionality. You're not allowed to be a cop, because, well, in their
again. This is
view,
why I say I would have preferred to have been in an actual cult.
an actual cult, because that wouldn't be so inconsistent, right?
Yeah, they would have said, "Oh, you want to be a cop? That's fine. Just get us some insider knowledge." Like, screw it, that's fine.
Well,
But if
or
I'm a
what would the benefits be to the LGBTQ community if there were more LGBTQ cops? Like, that's the benefits would be that if there was a situation, say a domestic violence circumstance, and the people involved are trans, then they would send you. Like, any sensible person should
the
understand that it
funny
would be
part is that
beneficial,
the city that this happened in and the department I was working for, I wanted to work for,
right?
are very, very pro LGBT. And as of now, the mayor is a trans woman, and I think everyone on the city council is some form of LGBT. Even the department has lesbian and gay officers. The chief at the time was very willing to have me on the force.
And that's the other thing that kind of reminds me, like, okay, so one of the things, and this kind of delves into the racial stuff for a moment, but like, one of the things that BLM would frequently say was that they wanted white people to march at the back of the march because, they didn't want these white people to make the whole thing about themselves or whatever, and that it's wrong to make it about yourself. And then yet they showed up at the vigil for that mass shooting, in a gay bar to make it about themselves and say, well, you guys are here for this, but why didn't you come to the Black Lives Matter rally, blah, 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 blah. And then I think it was Toronto Pride, Black Lives Matter shut the entire Pride parade down to make demands. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that this is relevant to the police, was that among those demands was that there would no longer be allowed to be any gay police floats in the Pride parade, that police in uniform should not be allowed to participate in Pride. And I'm just like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, if there's gay cops. So if they want to take part in Pride, then why, it's like, just, again, and that sounds to me like, because when you do this intersectional thing, that's why when people say, is it hard to define woke? I'm like, well, if I hesitate to define it, it's not because I don't know what it is. It's because I don't want to leave anything out, because there's so many factors. Or we're talking about third wave feminism. We're talking about CRT, anti-racism, based activism. We're talking about and all these things kind of branch together, and they often kind of follow the same playbook. Like they're all kind of in the same attitude, and that's because, as James Lindsay would point out, they're all kind of adapted cultural Marxism. So anyway, I'm gonna get off my soapbox here. So they don't like you anymore because you want to be a cop, and that's ridiculous and asinine to the ninth degree. And it makes me wonder. I mean, well, I guess maybe these people are also on the abolish police bandwagon, so who knows, right? But
I think some of them outright hated law enforcement.
right. And so there should just be no representation of the LGBTQ community in law enforcement, because that makes sense to, well, nobody, right? And the funny thing is that, they, well, we can get into that actually another time. So that would be a whole other rabbit hole. So in any case, so they reject you because of that. And it became about that. And then, so once you're outside of the cult, and and it's not a cult, because this is not bad. Cults are not bad enough.
Yeah.
That's what we've established. So now you're in a situation where you're free of the love bombing. You're free of being, affirmed all the time and told how cool you are because of this. Did that give you a moment of clarity at that point when you're just not being constantly bombarded?
Yeah, eventually I was bombarded. After all the love bombing was gone, and the affirmation again was gone. The best way I can describe it, I just woke up one day and reality just smacked me across the face. And I had to ask myself, what the heck am I doing? Because I realized, because I was looking at myself in the mirror and I was asking myself, what the hell am I doing? I saw myself with long hair and breast implants. I realized that even if I had gotten bottom surgery, had every other surgery to look more like a woman, the world would have accepted me as a woman. I would have never been a woman. It would have just been a caricature, a cosplay of what I believed a woman was. And I think at that realization is when I was like, I need to fix myself.
And so you said then you got more pushback when you wanted to detransition. So
That
how
is
did that
correct.
start? Did you talk to your therapist again? Or, well, I would imagine you probably didn't go back to the same person, right?
So I did go back to that therapist. And it was about 3 months, I want to say, after I had implants, when I finally went back. And I brought up the conversation. I said, I think I might have made a mistake. I want to look at the possibility of reversing everything. They didn't know what the word detransition was then. So immediately this therapist said, no, I'm not wrong. It's actually because I just had surgery and I'm still recovering from my implants being added. And I had undiagnosed childhood trauma that were the reasons of why I wanted to detransition.
What the hell?
Oh, and she wasn't even the worst one.
Oh, but wait, there's more. For
Oh, there
1995
is
a month.
always more. But wait, there's more.
Okay, so give us more. Give us more.
So after her, I realized, oh, this is crazy. And so I told her I had to lie to her on why I wasn't not gonna see her anymore. And then I found a second therapist that was through my health clinic, which was, behind hindsight being 2020, that was a bad idea because I went to a predominantly, actually no, the clinic I was going to was for transgender healthcare only. So they had medical staff that were pro affirmation. Now, because the incident that I had with the first one, I said, I need to get a backup plan on why I want to do this, or at least reverse everything.
Right.
So I go and speak to the military about enlisting, because at the time I couldn't enlist if I was transitioning. I either had to finish everything or reverse everything. I didn't realize that I had to finish everything. I thought it was only you have to reverse everything. So I go to my second therapist. I tell him that I want to enlist in the military, and they only gave me one option. I withheld the second option, which was going through everything. So the second therapist says, no, I should go. I should ignore the military and just go straight into law enforcement. And then he also told me the main concerning part was that I shouldn't detransition because we don't know the potential negative side effects of detransitioning.
What? What? Oh my God.
I
Okay.
know.
Okay. So they're telling you first. Well, then you just need to finish transitioning, and then we'll talk about detransitioning. I just like that in of itself is just mind blowing. Like, why would you do that? So in other words, now before we could talk about detransitioning, you would need to get what, bottom surgery too? Like, I mean, like how
So,
far?
again, that is what the military said. I said they told me I can only enlist in
Oh, I
for what?
misunderstood. Okay, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So the military said I can only enlist in one of two options. Either I finish the transition, so I would have to get bottom surgery,
Right.
or I reverse everything. I
Okay.
obviously withheld the first half of that to the second therapist.
Right.
And they said I can only enlist if I reverse everything. And I told him, if that's what it requires me, I told him I'm willing to stop everything, reverse everything for a while. When I come back, once I'm done with everything, I'll I'll start the process again, hoping that was good enough for him to sign off on it. No, that was not good enough for him. So he said he couldn't. That's again when he said no, and with his other reasoning. And he even told me that he spoke to one of the other doctors within the clinic, and they said that my insurance would not cover my detransition.
What the hell? Okay,
And
so what was that
technically, they were
true?
not wrong. They did
Oh,
not
okay.
cover it in the first place. They eventually covered it.
Okay, well, I'm glad that they did eventually. I just, to me, it's like, okay, so we can just do all this because we believe that you deserve this care. You know, I'm glad to hear that. I was worried that was going to go down a different direction, but you said initially that there was
Yeah,
pushback from your
yeah.
insurance company, and
To
like we don't want to pay for that.
cover the implants for their removal was about $30,000. I think that was just the surgery itself. Maybe with some other hospital related bills, but I do remember being told 3,000 by the surgeon.
That's crazy. So
Yeah,
okay, so you go through all of that, and then you try to get into the military, and then you decide, okay, so I guess what is the next chapter then? Like, so did you give up on the military? Did you give up on law enforcement?
I eventually gave up on law enforcement because that was not really as time passed, BLM and all that other fun stuff happening. I was like, yeah, it's a good thing I didn't join.
Right.
The military was just an excuse to detransition and to get the hell away from California for a while.
Well, there are other ways you could have accomplished that. I would just get a moving truck. It'd probably be a lot easier.
Well, I
But
already did. I'm in
right.
Texas.
Good
But
job.
again,
Good job.
the situation that I was in is what I was trying to at least. It worked for the time, or hoping it was.
No, and I imagine I was just more picking on you than anything else. But
No,
no,
I know, I know.
so it just so then you get to Texas, and then you probably take a breath of fresh air.
Literally.
Literally fresh air. Um
Well, Texas was until last year, so there's still a few years in the timeline we haven't spoken about yet.
oh, okay. Well, so in the
So
mid go
after
ahead,
the
go ahead.
second therapist was insane, and I will also add this between the first therapist and my last therapist, which was the third one, I had realized that I was starting to get to the point that I was going to be hopeless, that I was stuck like this for the rest of my life, that I was now battling alcoholism, which was not fun. I think I dealt with that for about a year, maybe 2 years. So I would spend a good amount of my time wasted.
And so you were driven to this level of depression into alcoholism, and it wasn't because of people not affirming you, it was because you realized you had made a mistake, and then now you
And
felt
nobody
trapped.
was willing to actually help me.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting to me that they demand absolute affirmation from everyone, including society. That, like, for example, in the state of Michigan where I live now, they're trying to pass laws to make it a felony to misgender someone.
I think they already passed it, didn't they?
Yeah, and I imagine Whitmer will probably sign it. What I'm concerned about is like how it will get interpreted. We have kind of a complicated, weird situation. To be honest with you, it's not all. I can't crap on the Democrats entirely because the Republicans in Michigan, well, they brought us the Flint water crisis. So it's not exactly a great situation. But we were also a heavily gerrymandered state. So we had this bizarre situation where, at least before, the state house and government was entirely dominated by Republicans due to gerrymandering, but then you end up with a Democrat governor. Like, somehow the majority approved a governor that was the opposite party. But anyway, I'm neither party, just to be clear. But the big point was just to say that I imagine Whitmer will sign it. I was surprised that it ever got, put forward. But the main point is that they want absolute submission to this idea. This is what Jordan Peterson was concerned about, which was compelled speech, right?
Wasn't that when he was still in Canada as a professor?
Yes, that's actually what started him down this road. Before that, he was content to just be a professor of psychology in Toronto. He wasn't trying to be a big political pundit, but because
if I remember correctly, I think at that time I was still insane.
Oh,
I don't think I.
So at that
I don't think I was a
time,
fan of him at the moment.
Him, right? Yeah, right. Well, you should go back and check him out now. I think especially.
Oh, I watch him. I even have one of his books.
Oh, well, that's awesome. And then the funny thing is, I don't agree with him about absolutely everything, but I agree with him about a lot of things. And a lot of the things he says just makes common sense. It's not, you don't even have to have some advanced psychological understanding to get him. But the main point was just that what he was concerned about was compelled speech. And everyone went, that's ridiculous. That's never going to happen, which is a common problem that I see on the alt left. And that's what I'm calling them now, because I'm kind of trying to part of this thing where, for example, Anna Kasparian comes out and says, well, I find myself politically homeless, because I can't be on the left.
The Young Turks chick?
Yeah, she's the Young Turks chick. She recently came out on a show and just openly kind of like felt like she was leaving a cult, was what she described it as, because she's gotten away from a bunch of the woke stuff. She's not interested in any of it, but she's still interested in healthcare and all these other leftist positions. And what I think is important is that people need to understand that this notion that you have to follow the woke inquisition without question is a relatively new phenomenon. Like, it's not, and that the idea that somebody has to be a right winger if they don't agree with any aspect, for example, of the trans stuff, if they don't agree with any aspect about the policing stuff, then you're automatically catapulted all the way to the right wing. Somehow, even if you still support Medicare for all, even if you still support free college, even if you still voted for Bernie Sanders, somehow you're still far right. And that's just absurd. Like there's no place in the right for people who have those views. So it's like, but they want to try to demand that if you don't obey us, then you are the opposite thing. Whether it's, well, if you have any questions about trans athletes in sports, you are immediately transphobic, and you hate trans people and you want them all to die. If you have any concerns whatsoever about maybe we shouldn't be rioting and burning down cities, well, then you're racist and you're evil and you hate all black people. Like there's no middle ground with these people. And that's why it reminds me of a religion. And that's why, but in this instance, you're saying it's even worse than that. And I'll go with that. So, okay. So we have, I want to make sure that give you more an opportunity. So we got like 20 minutes left. So
I could go for an hour and a half.
Okay. All right. So let's go over then. So you move on to all these different therapists. You kind of get yourself out of the situation. And then when you finally came back to, all right, look, I am a man. I want to be a man, and then all of that goes on. Did they give you testosterone again? Maybe? Like, how does it work?
So after the second therapist being useless, I eventually got a third therapist, and he helped me obviously deal with the alcoholism. And the thing is with him, because I'm speaking past tense. Mm-hmm. Due to the fact that I was in California, unfortunately, what he was doing was and is still considered conversion therapy. So we were walking on a fine line of eggshells, and he had to tell me from the beginning, that everything we were doing was of my own choice, that nothing there was him forcing his beliefs on me.
Right.
So that was hard for him, obviously.
Right.
But we eventually got everything cleared to get everything approved. Medication wise, I did take testosterone for a minute, but because I'm not a fan of needles for one, and two,
Right.
due to the fact that they give me so much drugs in the first place, I eventually just stopped taking the testosterone cold turkey again.
Well, it looks like you got a nice healthy beard.
Yep. Well, that's to be honestly, I was growing this out when I was still transitioning.
Hmm.
So for a minute, I was a bearded lady.
Well, it's good that you can laugh at it and look back at it in a positive light.
Yeah.
God, I
The
wish
only
more
reason
people
I
could do
was able
that.
to grow it was because California was so strict with those freaking masks that I had to wear them. So that gave me a cover to at least start the process of growing out the beard.
It's insane to me that you had to cover your beard because they would freak out if you were trying to go back to being a man. I just,
Well, again, this was more on my everyday life. Um, Mostly at my job, we were forced to wear the mask.
mm-hmm.
And I by then I was already in the process of trying to detransition. So I was like, I wonder how I'd look with a beard. So I started growing out for a while, but every so often at a certain point I would have to cut it off.
Gotcha. Well, they would probably be uncomfortable too. Like if you're trying to wear a mask, those things sucked. I hated
Oh,
that.
definitely.
Like,
Well, I also had to be cautious on how if any of it showed through the mask. I had long hair, so I was trying to cover it, but because my family, mostly my mother, was unaware of my plans of detransitioning, she would say, "Well, you say you're a woman, but you have a beard." I say, "I'm too lazy, and I don't have to do anything because we have to wear masks." But yeah, she eventually
well,
made me cut the beard a couple times.
well, it's actually good that you brought that up because we had a question from the audience, and again, only discuss this to the level that you were comfortable. But while in the call, what did your real family say about it all? Did you distance yourself from your family?
Yeah, I distanced myself from my family for about a year and a half. Eventually, I reached out to them again, but my parents were not happy of what I was doing, but still supported me because I was their son. And
Right.
then my grandparents were not supportive of any of it, but I eventually found out that they had been praying since the minute they found out, and until I reversed everything. So for them, it was a 4 year long battle until they saw results. But I had given up about 2 years into this.
Hmm. So basically, at least it's good that you didn't like completely sever those connections, and that now you're able to get back to
Yeah,
your family.
my
And
connections are still a bit rocky, but that's also because of other stuff.
well, yeah, again, only go into as much detail as you want to on that because it's not
Uh,
as
well,
necessary. But you, whatever you want to say, you can
yeah,
totally
like I
say
said,
it.
let me see. My father, okay, our relationship is now starting to become a little rocky again, but that's due to his choices. Uh, Also, doesn't help that he was the catalyst that started all this,
Right.
which, well, let me rephrase that. So, I guess I have to go back a bit because it also adds to the story, which I can't believe I forgot about that. But then again, memory fog is one of the side effects I've gotten.
No problem. Go ahead.
um, so, like I said, well, I have to go back a bit.
Sure.
After I started seeing this therapist, eventually my father found out, and I knew it was my mother who told him because I had only told my mother. So when my father found out, I'm not sure if I can use this word
You can
on
actually
live.
say anything you want on my stream. I'm already shadow banned, so you can say any word you want. It's fine.
My father raped me with a prostitute in Mexico to
Oh,
try to cure me.
I think. Oh, you know what? I think I watched that. Yep, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Tried to cure
Uh,
you. I mean, did you come away? I guess the question would then be: are you attracted to women, like
I'm
or not?
attracted to women, but at the time I was not really attracted to anybody.
Right. And how old were you?
Because again, I was a very socially awkward young man, and the other reason why I didn't really want to be with anyone is because I was raised Catholic,
Right.
and religion says no sex until marriage, and
Right.
I was trying to
Right.
follow my religion. Unfortunately, my father said, "Screw this! I'm gonna my kid with a prostitute."
I wonder if he brought that up in the confessional.
Doubt it.
Because I totally get what you're saying, but during the time period of my life when I was Christian, I was like, "Oh, it says here don't have sex before marriage." Okay, I guess I'm not doing that. Like, and it wasn't a fight. Like that's what you're supposed to do, and it's something that so many Christians, quote unquote Christians at that point, just kind of ignore. Like, oh well, that's an inconvenient rule, so I'm not going to follow that one. But like one of the things, and again, I'm not religious now, but I point out that a lot of those old fashioned ideals had very, obvious purposes beyond just the issue of obeying God. Being promiscuous before you're in a good relationship has all kinds of consequences. We can get into that at another time, but like, I studied for another writing I was doing, I studied the seven cardinal sins and the seven, virtues, and a lot of them just make sense. Like it's not just about whether or not you believe. Maybe you don't believe that there's a demon named Asmodeus who specifically is the demon of lust, and that they're trying to bring your soul to hell through lust. You don't have to believe all of that. You can just realize, well, maybe being promiscuous is not necessarily a good idea because you might have kids, that aren't going to have a good family because you had sex with somebody out of wedlock and you weren't really into them and they weren't good parents. Like there's all kinds
They
of
were only
built-in
one night
consequences.
stand, and now you're a father.
Right, exactly. And then what kind of consequences does that have for the child? So that's why I was getting at is that, and I'm thinking about writing a book about it, like for atheists, because there is just clear logic and rational reasoning behind why the seven deadly sins are deadly. It's not about, you don't have to wait to go to hell to get punished for doing all that stuff. It'll happen in your life. But also, so anyway, so you've had, more or less though, you kind of you did distance yourself from your family for a while, but you got back out of it, and then obviously the trans community at this point has completely abandoned you, and I'm sure if anything, you're a total pariah. And then I
Well,
know that you
nowadays I'm just a genocidal maniac, maybe to the level of a certain German leader,
right,
according
of
to the
course,
activists.
you so quickly get to be Hitler, and I guess looking back on this now, I think this probably goes without saying, but like, what are your views on child transition?
I am completely against children transitioning in all aspects.
Right.
Even that even goes to people up to 25 because unfortunately our brains are not fully developed until 25. And unfortunately, I have also seen a lot of individuals who are legal adults um, who are not mentally capable until a much older age and still
That's
transition. And we've seen the negative side effects, especially with detransitioners.
and that's science that I bring up all the time on this show because it's true. That's
But
why
science is now is transphobic.
well, right. And that was the thing that they tried, because now they're trying to suggest that children, have the ability to make these decisions, and
Well,
that's just not in line with what the
their
brain.
perfect case of child transitioning is Jazz Jennings.
Right.
Jazz transitioned at a young age medically. And do you know all the negative side effects on Jazz?
I know a good deal of them. I haven't looked at it closely, but by all means, share.
Yeah, so Jazz has had, I believe, either 3 or 4 surgeries for bottom surgery. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, well, I knew that they were having problems with their dilation. I didn't know they had that many surgeries. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the reason was because he started puberty blockers and estrogen before Tanner stage 2. So what that um, is it's some stuff that the scientists categorize. Tanner stage 2 is actually very young and actually very early, still in puberty. So due to at the age that he did, he unfortunately kept a micropenis. And by the time he was 17, when he had bottom surgery, which he was a minor, yes, with his parents' consent. And I say that because these activists say nobody gets surgeries as a minor. Jazz Jennings was a minor. Parent consent or not, still a minor. But
yeah, and there's plenty more like her too. Continue, or him, or
yeah,
whatever we're saying today.
so due to Jazz having a micropenis, due to all of the hormones that were given to him at such a young age, they did not have enough material. Oh god,
Right.
I guess that's the only word I can use to create a neo vagina for him. So they had to do multiple surgeries, multiple revisions, and I don't think it. I know it hasn't ended well for him because if you look at photos of him before he had bottom surgery to now, he's gained a ton of excess weight. He's binge eating, very depressed, and there was even a clip of him saying he doesn't feel like his true self
Yes.
anymore.
Yeah, and I saw that, and that was mind blowing. Along with the mother, like going, "I'm gonna freaking jam this in you and dilate you." I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I want
Yeah,
to take a freaking baseball bat to you right now. I was like, "What
I
is
live in
wrong with
Texas,
you?"
so we can do other stuff.
Right, right. My point was just like, how dare somebody act like that? Because again, is this really about the kid? Is this really about the kid? Is this for
No, this is
Jazz?
about the parents.
Is this? Are you sure this
Uh,
isn't for you, Mom? Because this is you,
this
right?
is what I see, especially with a lot of the parents who tout their kids being trans. And I saw this in Texas when I was going to the legislator. There was a lot of parents saying that their transgender child are scared that and all this other stuff. Even siblings were saying it, and I'm just in the back like, y'all are crazy. Y'all are crazy. I'm sorry,
Right, right,
but uh, unfortunately, I do see that it's a lot of the families that are touting their kids as trans are getting a rush of euphoria as well because they're also being seen as those example parents of what to do with a trans kid, the loving parents, the ones that are actually what's the perfect image of a parent. But that's false. We know that's not the right thing to do as a parent. The right thing as a parent should be like, no, you should not transition. You should not be destroying your body. You're perfectly fine as you were born.
Well,
But
and that would
that's
also up to and include being that if you're gay, you're gay. Okay, whatever, right?
well,
Like
the
that's
thing that a lot of people don't understand that when they try to compare, when there are gay adults comparing themselves to these trans kids, there's a huge difference. I want to ask these people who are gay and are supporting the transition of minors, what surgeries, what medications did they have to do to be gay, com- uh, compared to these kids who want to transition and are saying that they're trans? Because for a gay man, all he has to do is be interested in another gay man and do unspeakable acts,
right.
which is, I will not say what they do for your viewers.
Well, no, and
But
that's fine. Well, I
yeah,
think. Well, the point I was
but
going to get at
again,
was
that
just like,
compared to a child who wants to transition, they have to take estrogen and prolactin if they're boys, puberty blockers as well. They have to cut off their penis, add breast implants, dilate their penis or whatever's left of it for the rest of their lives. Young ladies have to take a lot of other medication. It's like completely different between gay and trans.
and it sounds like, well, one of the reasons I was bringing that up because Jordan Peterson brings up the study that says that in like apparently like 80% of the cases, if you just leave these kids alone, they frequently just find out, okay, well, I guess I'm just gay, and then they move on with their life. Like, and that should be an acceptable answer, but it almost feels like they're
Well, that's
trying to
conversion therapy, obviously.
right. Just go ahead and stay in the body you're in and just be attracted to who you're attracted to. And that's one of the things that has always been a conflict for me on this is that the part of me that is rooted in libertarian thought says that a consenting adult should be free to do what they want with their bodies. Okay, that's fine. Like we let them get tattoos, people mutilate themselves, people do all kinds of weird things to themselves, really crazy piercings, things like that. But the reason why I still feel that even with that sort of libertarian note in the situation, we should still be aware of the fact that it's very obvious that the medical community is asleep at the wheel, or worse than that, really. They're aware of it. And that's one of the things, like, especially, I already kind of knew this, but when we did the Arby show, which went on for literally 4.5 hours of him going over WPATH with me, was that they don't have any idea what they're talking about. There are no long-term studies. There are none, period. And then they admit, well, we can't really have those because it would be unethical. So we're just going to go ahead and do this thing anyway, which in of itself should be unethical. You shouldn't be, doing anything so drastic to someone that you don't have evidence for as to whether or not it's safe or not. So instead, now what they're going to do is they're going to use these people who they've prescribed this radical treatment to as the test. You guys will all be the study. That's how we're going to handle this, and then of course when we're done, then if there's any complications, well, darn, that's too bad. But what I think will likely happen instead, especially for example, if the suicide problem doesn't start, they'll always double down and claim it's because they're not getting love bombed enough.
Yeah, we already see that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, there's a mother in LA, California, who, I don't know if you heard about her, but her daughter wanted to transition the state, with other organizations, kidnapped the daughter legally, and I had to add that.
Right.
And eventually the daughter did transition, started testosterone and a lot of other medication, caused enough pain that the young lady eventually took her own life by jumping in front of a train.
The whole thing about it, I mean, one of the things I thought about, and I mentioned this to Arby recently, was that you ever think about this fact? How many of these drugs that get pushed by big pharma, and they have those commercials, with the person living their best life because they're on this drug, how many of these drugs have suicidal thoughts as a possible side effect, right?
I'm pretty sure a majority of them do.
Right. It's always, or some sexual side effects. That's another one. Apparently they all have sexual side effects too. But the reason why, and these are not even trans, gender drugs. We're just saying the drugs in general, a lot of things that Big Pharma is doing seem to have suicidal thoughts as a possible problem. And so then you wonder what happens to these people when they take these hormones. And that's why, like, when I was talking to Leah Keith, she's a longtime trans exclusionary basically she's a TERF, I guess, is what they, and she stated, we were discussing the fact that I had a roommate who was trans, who was on testosterone at one point, because they were female transitioning to male, but when they got on their hormones, they were crazy. Like, it was not good for them. It was very obviously a problem. They would just get irrationally violent, in their demeanor. And I remember once I was just sitting at the dinner table. Well, I wasn't in the dinner table. I was at the computer table, sitting there just eating, and like I wasn't chewing with my mouth open or anything, but they got up from their where they were sitting, walked right over to my desk with their fist clenched, and said that they didn't understand why, but something about the way I was chewing made them want to punch me in the face. And I just looked at them like, what? Like, and totally irrational, totally insane, but this person was very clearly not doing well on these hormones.
Well, I do know testosterone for the young women who do take it, and those who I have spoken with have said they did have a lot of anger moments with a lot of anger.
Right. And that's, well, and that's what it'll do. And that's why teenage boys frequently have, a tough time as well. But as Leah Keith pointed out, if you don't have the receptors to process testosterone, it's going to be even worse. It's going to be this extreme thing where your body doesn't really know what to do with it. So it's going to be so much worse for you, right? Like you said, young women on testosterone, that's rough, but it also does, while at the same time, make you feel this euphoria. So, like, I don't know if you watched the video I did about what happened to Corey Mason. Are you familiar with Corey Mason?
I want to say the name sounds familiar, but I'll just let you explain.
Sure. They were a trans little girl. They did this video about being bullied in school where they were passing signs in front of them, and it went super viral. And then a book about their young life is still being shown to kids in schools, and then so at some point during the course of all of that, their mother decided that they were also trans and wanted to be a man.
Oh, yeah, I know that story. Yeah.
Right. I
If I
did a
remember
whole
correctly, I think recently when I think I saw an update on that child that they're doing like some type of porn or something.
yeah, they're literally on OnlyFans. I did a whole expose on that, and in order to confirm it, I had to go down to some pretty dark places that I never want to go again. It's just that that's the kind of thing that could be so easily be a rumor that you have to confirm it before you go telling people. But yeah, basically, they're doing OnlyFans porn of themselves, and mind you, I don't know what it's been a little while since that video was done because now they're a little older, but like they looked like maybe 13 or 14 is how their body looked when they were doing this, and they had an underdeveloped penis because of the treatments that they were on, and I was like, it was absolutely disgusting, and it got shared on Twitter, and it was amazing that it stayed up as long as it did because the only thing that the person who put it up did was like not show the breasts. Everything else was very, very, very graphic. And it was on Twitter. Like hundreds of thousands of people saw this before it got taken down. I have no idea. But it led to me going, what the hell happened to this kid? And like they apparently at some point got kicked out of their house. And it was around the same time that this video was made. I'm like, well, I have a funny feeling that I know why that happened, right? But we don't know because after they were no longer useful to the media, and as soon as they became not convenient to the narrative of these, oh, look at this sweet little girl, they're trans and their life is so much better now, is now they're doing OnlyFans and more specifically appealing to people who want to see barely pubescent looking people, doing things inappropriate, right? That's the kind of people that are watching this at this point, right? That's not even just normal porn. It's, so anyway, but yeah, they're what I was getting at with bringing up their mom, who became one of their dads, I guess, was that they described the first time they took testosterone, and they said, "Oh, this is so amazing. This is what, like we mentioned the euphoria earlier, but they were like, this is what normal feels like. This was the thing I needed, to feel like, perfect and one and actually myself." And then, so but anyway, yeah, that was what happened to Corey Mason, and then but the point was is that as far as to what happened to their quote unquote mom, you know, was that they went through all of that, and their husband was still just kind of there, and said that they were still together, but they admitted that their husband had a hard time with like, their wife removing their breasts and getting all of these things done and all that. Well, yeah, obviously you would, right? And so, but yeah, the main point of this was just to say that these hormones are extremely powerful, and if your body's not designed to properly process them at that rate, you're going to have all kinds of complications, and that we don't really know what the long-term concerns are. But as the transgender, former transgender activist pointed out in What is a Woman, we are looking at cancer, and one of my trans friends is literally has cancer, like right now. Like we're looking at underdeveloped brains. We're looking at bone density issues. We're looking at all kinds of problems, but we don't have enough data yet on that either. And we're getting there, but unfortunately, it looks like in order to get that data, the process is going to involve essentially experimenting in an entire generation of children.
Yep. Unfortunately, me and everyone who's gone through this are lab rats. They're guinea pigs.
And you started it, at least like somewhat later. I mean, how old were you when all this started?
I started medication at the age of 19.
19. So, but to those of who were talked into this at an even younger age, I mean, it had to have been rough. At least you were able to more or less go through puberty. So I imagine that's probably going to help your detransition, right?
I think that's been somewhat helpful. Unfortunately, though, I have taken a huge toll because I eventually learned that before I had done anything, I was already low testosterone.
You think that, well, and so you were probably low testosterone even going into the problem, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So before I did anything, I was low testosterone.
And that could have led to why you were having so many problems struggling with your masculinity itself.
Yes.
And I think that what the proper answer to that would be, if you were low testosterone, they should have treated that. That
Well,
probably would
again,
have made you
that's
feel like $1,000,000.
yeah, but that's not cost effective for them. It's
Right?
better for them to turn me into a lab rat.
Or keep you completely dependent on them for your whole life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Luckily, I woke up early enough that I dodged enough bullets, but unfortunately, some of those bullets still hit me. So I
And
do have enough side effects that aren't fun.
no, it's just, it's reprehensible that this happened to you in the first place. And I think at the end of the day, so now coming away from it, you're basically on the view that all transness is basically false. Like you don't believe it's a thing. Is that
Yes, that
correct?
is correct. I don't agree with any of it. I know a lot of people might disagree with me, especially those who say adults should be able to do what they want. Normally, yes, I would agree, but I don't think people fully understand the danger of what this is because you're sterilizing yourself. You're turning yourself again into a lab rat. You are becoming a lifelong patient to these drug companies that if you had not done, you would have been perfectly healthy. So I cannot condone any of that stuff.
Well, right. In my perspective on it, I want to be clear. I'm still kind of, my personal jury is out on how I feel about whether or not it's a thing. I know that I had an interesting conversation once on my Discord. And by the way, guys, if you want to join our Discord, we have some pretty lively debates. The main rule is just no personal attack. But I was talking to Crowdsourced Politics / Cypher, and they shared a study that was extremely small where they were taking brain scans of allegedly trans people and saying that their brains were more similar to the gender that they identified as. And I said, okay, well, this is an extremely small sample size, so I can't really just say that this is evidence. But then I asked them, I'm like, but what if, okay, so like, let's say that this is true. Let's say that we can absolutely detect if somebody is really trans. Well, then at that point, you should be on board with saying that nobody should transition unless they have these tests, right? And then they hesitated a moment and went, well, no, I mean, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's what I thought. you know, and it's because I mean, as Lier said, she feels that she just knows that they know it's bullshit. They don't want to push it past that. But for me, it's just, again, my libertarian self says, okay, well, I guess this is your right, but I do also at the same time feel that it's my obligation to be sure people know the truth, and the truth is going to be that these, artificial vaginas are not what you think. Artificial penises are not what you think.
Yep, they're sold sunshine and rainbows, but in the end, they get nothing.
Right. And it's basically, you think it's hot snot on a silver platter, but it's nothing but a cold booger on a paper plate. And it's unhealthy. That's one of the reasons why. The funny thing is, even the still trans people that I know who are sticking with it but are against transition for children are like, I wouldn't want a kid to go through that. It's horrible. It's painful. It's complicated. It would be a terrible thing to go through your childhood, was essentially what they said. It's, that it just even the people who are comfortable being trans that are against childhood transition are saying this is a very traumatic experience to go through. It's a terrible amount of surgery, and all kinds of other craziness. That's why they feel that even though they believe trans is a thing, they still don't think kids should be doing it. And I think at the end of the day, that would have to be I hope that the people who, for example, you feel that trans is not a thing, that you should still be able to find yourself in a situation where sometimes you may ally with other trans people who will at least go, well, let's just not do this to kids. Like, you can still work with people like that, right?
Yeah, I work with everyone, anyone on this fight. Obviously, there's people who I disagree personally, but I put my own beliefs to the side so we can at least get children safeguarded as a bare minimum. Personally, again, I would say there should be more regulations on this, even on the adult side, because if I, an adult, was able to destroy my body, and we see already kids doing it, I think we should take another look into this.
And I'm
Luckily,
on
the
board with
European
that.
countries are already doing that.
Right. And I'm definitely on board with that. And I'm also not okay with adults being lied to. Like, and that's it's medical malpractice. Like, I mean, it really is. It's medical fraud. Like, and that's wrong. It doesn't matter what a person wants to do. If you're leading them to believe that this will be the cure and the fix for all of their problems, and it's really not, then, that's a horrible miscarriage of what the whole Hippocratic Oath is supposed to be about: do no harm. So
Yeah.
we're running out of time for this session, but a lot of people really enjoyed this conversation, and I do hope that you'll come back sometime. And I know I also plan on doing just some panels that are just going to be random, groups of people. So it wouldn't even necessarily be about trans issues. It could just be about world events, in which case we just try to bring on people for different walks of life. And I hope that you'll consider coming on for one of those as well. I don't want you to think we only have to talk about trans stuff if you come on my show.
Well, that's the only thing I have knowledge in. Everything else I really don't care for.
Well, no, and that's
Which,
fair. If that's the direction you
well, let
take.
me rephrase that. I personally, because I will say this: before we started, I did send you an article, and it says that I do what I'm doing for attention.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna tell y'all a secret that not a lot of people know. I hate attention.
Well, aside from that, what kind of attention are you getting? You're not certain. You're certainly not getting loved bombed by the conservatives. They're probably saying, "Well, thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth about this," and then moving on with their day, right?
Oh, definitely. A lot of the conservatives are that way, but there are obviously those on both on the left and the right who see the human aspect of this.
Right. And that's what I'm hoping for. And in the end, one of the reasons why, despite being left leaning myself, I don't really spend a lot of time on that is that I feel that we have much bigger problems. Like, I think my friend Logical Checkmate, who's from the Czech Republic, once pointed out, he's like, look, you guys can't even get like the basic facts straight about what happened to Kyle Rittenhouse. How the hell are you even going to be able to talk about healthcare or college or any of these other things until you can have real conversations wherein people are not just slinging lies back and forth at each other because winning is more important than telling the truth? And I was like, that's a very profound statement, and it fits with my personal philosophy. I was heavily influenced by a guy named Jacques Fresco, and he wanted to see science become the way that people govern themselves, but in a way that actually has to be done correctly. Like, science is not at fault for any of this. Like, the scientists who misrepresented things to you, misrepresented things to other trans people, when you peel away the layers, you find out they're not following the scientific method. They're not. So at that point, they cease to be scientists. They're just ideological tools. And that's unfortunate.
Ideological activists, in other words.
Right, exactly. And at that point, they're not doing any science anymore. Science didn't fail us. Science didn't fail us, even with the COVID stuff. And that's not a right or left position either. I mean, Brett Weinstein's a biological science. He's a biological, what is it? He is a evolutionary biologist. He is a scientist, and that's why he had concerns about vaccines, right? Like, it wasn't that science failed. It's that, I think RFK Jr. recently said in a conversation with Bill Maher on his podcast, he said, statistics don't lie, but sometimes statisticians do, which made a lot of sense. They can claim that they have evidence for anything and then just keep filibustering. I just had an conversation on Twitter along that same line. I demanded somebody show me the long-term studies. They then shared with me a study that went on for a single year and then blocked me. So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, yep.
Well,
Quick,
Twitter is a
no.
fun place, I will say that.
And it certainly can be. So thank you so much for coming on today. It was a long time getting it together, and I kind of just had to jump on the microphone and go, oh, he's ready, let's go. I guess at this point, before we leave, because I want people to kind of have a sense of closure to your story, although obviously it's still ongoing. Where are we now? How did this all end for you to where you are today? And what are you doing about it? I know that you're testifying, before, government officials when asked and things like that. So go ahead.
So right now, what I am doing, or since, to add some closure to my story, I have escaped the communist state of California to the free state of Texas. And I have been at least living my life at a better percentage, I guess you can say, than that compared to California. I am now, I guess you can call me an activist. I don't really see myself as one. I'm just speaking the truth. But I am speaking with legislators as much as I can, going to events, rallies, telling the people what's happened to me, because unfortunately, the majority of those speaking out on this topic are young women. And I don't say that in a negative light. I'm just saying that there's not enough young men or men in general who are speaking about the harm that there is being done. So unfortunately, I've been the most I guess, prominent male speaker here in the U.S. who is doing what I'm doing. Most of them are just saying on social media, and that's it. But I'd say the main thing that I've been able to accomplish since doing all this for the last few years is I assisted in passing a bill here in the state of Texas, which is Senate Bill 14. I testified in both the Senate and the House multiple times and explained what happened to me and why we shouldn't be allowing those under the age of 18 to do this. Eventually, after enough pushback, um, the House and the Senate agreed to it. And it was so our bill was good enough that it even got some Democrats on the House side to vote for it.
So you got all of that done, and to be honest with you, Abel, one of the things that you just said, kind of like, you didn't offend me. It's not that you did anything wrong. It's sad that you had to clarify. I don't consider myself an activist. I'm just telling the truth. Like, as if being an activist can be about not telling the truth. And that's what bothers me about it right now, is that unfortunately being an activist at this point,
again, I had to clarify that because of these false articles that are written about me, call me an activist.
right. Did you want to take a moment and address a certain article real quick before we go?
Sure. I can. I don't want to say which article it was because after looking at it myself, it gave revealing information about other detransitioners, but it falsified some of the years that I was doing. So it tossed out a few years out of their own ass. Claimed that I had a salvation from God. Which was another reason for detransitioning. Didn't talk about me being raped by my father and a prostitute. And let me clarify, my father took me to a prostitute, and sexual relationship was with a prostitute, not with my father.
Right.
Which I technically shouldn't be laughing because it's a serious topic, but
it is an important distinction to make.
yes. But and again, they also claim I get money and attention from this. Again, I don't like attention. I hate it personally. I think once all this is over, I might just disappear from everything. Might. And money. I am a broke 26-year-old. I am living paycheck to paycheck.
Right. So, well, yeah, you're not. And I think that it's important to note that what happens to people in your situation is that they need to find some way to demonize you. They need to find some way to discredit you. They're not going to focus on the things that you said. They're going to, no true Scotsman, maybe suggest you were never trans in the first place. They're going to try to find ways to personally attack you, and it's all in an effort to try to silence you, because
sure,
that's
they
a lot
can
easier.
try to discredit me, all that, but I have the proof.
Right. Oh, I know. It's
like
just
my
that.
chest right here is like all the scarring and everything. I won't show it to your viewers just because I don't really like showing it anymore.
No,
But
they'd have to
besides
pay
that,
extra for that anyway if they want to see
yeah,
chest.
if you want to see besides the ones that are already online, you have to join my OnlyFans at OnlyFans/Abel Garcia.
Oh, well, it worked for Corey Mason, right? So, man, okay. Well, I'm
Don't
glad
worry,
that
I
we.
don't post too much. I will post occasional feet pics when requested, but I'm mostly wearing tactical outfits.
Well, there you go. See, you're wearing tactical outfits. You're definitely masculine now. So, thank you very much. I'm glad we got to end this with a little bit of brevity. And again, to those of you in the audience who see people who are in this situation where they're doing the brave thing of telling the truth, please make sure that you look out for these people, support them, follow them, make sure that they're safe. I mean, like, for example, one of my friends is Freya. Freya is a trans person who maintains that they are trans, but does not want children to be transitioned, is not on board with drag shows in front of children. And Freya literally puts their life in danger because they show up at, protests where Antifa is there. And
Yeah,
Freya is
I
not a
love
very big person.
Antifa.
Freya is a
They don't
very,
like me
very
though.
small person. If Antifa got their hands on them, it would go badly. So make sure that you support these people when you see it, because it's easy to just think of them as just like, media figures or whatever. And that is one thing that I took from the Mac Beggs conversation, as strange as it got towards the end, that I did feel that was necessary when I talked to them on the phone before the show, was just that these are real humans. These are people with lives and families and all that. And even the ones that you disagree with, you've got to remember to humanize these people when you're putting them into perspective in your mind. And consider that, have some compassion, because even the trans people that you disagree with in this situation, in their own way, they're also victims. That's actually how Daryl Davis, people ask him, how could he as a black man take so much interest in trying to rescue people from the Ku Klux Klan? And he said, they're victims. They're victims of a cult. So
I feel, again,
go ahead.
I feel like the KKK would be a better cult than the trans community. I am gonna get attacked for that.
Well, hey, I mean, you don't have to, mutilate your body, and you don't have to take crazy hormones to be part of the KKK. Tends to make you wonder if they have a better health plan too.
You know what? Nope. Oh, I'm gonna leave it then. I had a thought, and I was like, yeah, no, I'd rather not finish that thought.
Well, for sure. All right, folks. Thank you. Abel, did you have anything else you wanted to share before we're done?
Yeah, I saw people asking about my social media. So yes, I do have a social media account. I'm on Twitter at officialableg, and Instagram, again, same thing, officialableg. Unfortunately, I am taking a break for personal reasons. I will be back hopefully by the end of the year, if not next year. I know that's a long break, but I need it.
No kidding. All right. Well, you take a break and you keep us posted on how you're doing, and keep doing what you're doing. And
it just has Mountain Goddess. She's usually in my DMs and making sure I'm okay.
Well, good. Well, she's a good person, and she's a regular in our Discord. So thanks again for everybody for tuning in today. You have been listening to V Radio and my interview with Abel Garcia. If you're interested, if you liked this show, if this is the first time you've ever checked me out, please make sure you like and subscribe. And those of you who have been listening this whole time and didn't take a moment to hit the like button, please help me out with the algorithm. Hit the like button. Share my stream. I am also looking for supporters on Patreon, Subscribestar, and PayPal. I've been cranking out an enormous amount of content, some of which is literally very long. Just suffering through 4.5 hours of trans information with RV should earn me a Patreon, supporter or two. I wasn't going to do that, but literally, like, I got a call that I was being laid off from the little job that I have of doing things on the internet, and my income got cut in half. So I've had a lot more time to do a lot more content. So if you appreciate what I'm doing, please lend me your support. And if you can't afford to lend me any financial support, just sharing these streams, sharing these videos through word of mouth and otherwise, trying to introduce people to my channel will help a lot, because the social media algorithm hates me. I was on Good Logic again, and that's how I got over 5,000 subscribers. But in the time that I was on Good Logic, I literally was watching my subscriber count bounce up and down like a tennis ball, because I would get 3 subscribers and then I would lose 2. Then I would get 5 and then I would lose 4. And there were people literally reporting to me in the chat, I just subscribed to you a half hour ago, and for some reason I'm unsubscribed to you. So those kinds of shenanigans go on. If you like this kind of content, then you're going to have to support it, whether it's mine, Strategic Eyes, Liberty Unleashed, Johnny Walker Dread, Good Logic. I mean, he's doing really well, but he should be doing a lot better than he is. To be honest with you, Good Logic is probably my favorite law tuber, and he doesn't have as many subscribers as, say, like Nick Rekieta, and I think Good Logic's content is a lot better. Not trying to cause any trouble between the two of them. I know they're friends, but my point is talent doesn't get rewarded here unless you guys share it. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. I'll talk to you very briefly off the air after we go off the air, if that's okay with you, Abel, and then we'll be good to go. And again, thanks again, everybody. Consider joining our Discord. I hope to see you there. We have good, lively conversations, but if nothing else, join me on these social media accounts like Telegram, Discord, Facebook, just to be absolutely sure that you become aware of my content. And if I ever do get deleted from YouTube, it's the same thing. Like, Neo Unrealist has like 30,000 subscribers, or did, on YouTube. When he made the transition to Rumble, a lot of people didn't even know, because he was just deleted. It's not like there's a warning, hey, only one more week left for this guy. No, they delete you because they're hoping nobody will follow you. So for the sake of redundancy, make sure you also subscribe to me on my other mediums. I'm not going to stop if I get deleted from YouTube, but it'll be much harder for me to get a bigger audience. Thanks again.